study circle meeting on code of ethics, there are this popular line which I always remember: right to do things and to do right things. In between this is what ethics lies. And today we are going to talk about code of ethics, which is very important as a profession, chartered accountants. We have an eminent speaker, Niranjan Raman, to address us on this. I request Chairman Pramod Arage to escort the speaker to the dais and greet him. Welcome to you, Niranjan. I request Chairman to give his welcome address.
Good evening, members. I think professional ethics is what we've been hearing since we read articles. And what is it? We all know it's our professional dharma. What differentiates us and a regular accountant is this professional ethics. And other people or any people in finance, I think this is the one key term which differentiates us as professional ethics. We were discussing whether this professional ethics applies only to us in the sense most of the people I see are practitioners. Are there anybody from industry as well here? No? Okay. Yeah, many people have misconception that the professional ethics is only applicable for the practitioners, not for the industries. But of late, if you see all the major changes in the professional ethics are even equally applied to even members in industry. Let's say earlier, person who was giving us the financial statements, he said, okay, the risks is on you, so I've just prepared the financial statement and the auditor is responsible. But now, after introducing this no-clerk provision, it equally applies to even members in industry. And most of the time, and I also see the registration for today's event is more than full. We had to stop the online registration. I was thinking whether it was the subject, speaker, or what is it. And then I realized, yes, it's by our institute, which says that mandatory 2 hours is required. So I think that's the reason we had a major registration. And today we have CA Niranjan, who is going to dwell into this subject. I welcome you as well. I had requested him to take a lot of recent council decisions because we've been hearing to the old days where they said, okay, the board cannot be of this size and we are not allowed to advertise. So when I was just discussing, if the council allow us to advertise also, are we going to do that? So when we were just having that debate, we came up, we said, even if council allows, we are still under that mindset, we will not go and as a practitioner of a partnership or a proprietorship firm, we will not probably go ahead and do the advertising activity as well. So that is already inculcated. There are certain things we consider it as taboo, but of late, thanks to the council, they realized a lot of things has to be liberated. And as President says that we need big fours from India to go global. I think there are certain restrictions which is placed. Probably let's not call restriction. Probably let's say there might be certain hindrances. So the council is deeply examining how we can take this forward. If we need to be global, I think our professional code of ethics has to be revised. And we are happy to say that our professional ethics, what we follow in India, is very similar to the international standards of ethics. So we are there at par. Before I hand over the stage to our secretary, I would like to make a small announcement. I know most of the time when I say this small announcement and below when you were registering, most of my staffs were saying, why don't you register for the startup fair? I think probably they were threatening you, saying that please register, and they were back of you. Yes, of course, that was, I think, I am the culprit of that, because this is the event first time Bangalore branch is hosting, and I feel this is a must for everybody. I was speaking to quite a lot of practitioners. They were saying, why do I register? I don't work in startup space. I know this is a startup sphere, but if you see, Bangalore is a city of startup, and not necessarily that I might have to have a startup client. There are quite a lot of sessions which will deal on the cutting edge technology even for audit practitioners. Many were saying that it is not relevant to my traditional practice. Of course, we are looking at traditional practice, but however, there are quite a lot of concepts which are dealt in this startup sphere. So it's just not only for the startups, this event is there, even for practitioners like us, even I am a traditional practitioner. Though I don't deal up in startup, I took this initiative of getting it to Bangalore and saying that we are going to host this. It's not only about the startup which is going to be dealt here, there's quite a lot of for us practitioners as well, which we will there. And startup practice is rapidly booming. If you see, quite a lot of practitioners are into this field and they are probably taking the cake. And we have the own startup hub and we are not geared up to that. So there might be complexities in audits and the requirement for startup to be dealt in a different way. And for that to start with, we should know the mindset, what the startup is and what is the startup expecting from us. Including, let's say, the sessions will be mostly taken by the CXOs, unicorns of the startup. So at least let's get to hear them saying that what is that we have to change our mindset and how do we go about empathizing the startups and how do we go about it. Also in the startup sphere, we have quite a lot of open session on masterclass. Then secondly, we have overseas outsourcing services, also a specialized topic which we are going to dwell there, and there's a specialized workshop. Yesterday, every day our committee is organizing committee is sitting up to 12 hours. Post 12 we discuss quite a lot of things and discussion is going on to bring the best to the Bangalore and the sessions which is going to head up. And we will also have placement program for experienced chartered accountants. For people in industry also we are trying. And this is an ecosystem where industry and practice meets. So I think I would say this is a must. Without being spoken to you and without being marketed to you, I didn't want them to do take your decisions. But if you ask me, I would like to see everyone there saying so that we can build our practice. Let's look at what are the opportunities in startups we have and what are the cases where we can deal with, and let's increase our professional opportunities as well. So with this, I wouldn't like to take much of the time because I know it's code of ethics today, and entire session will be dealt upon that. I think I would like to welcome you all. With this, I would like to hand over it to our secretary. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. It's time to introduce the speaker of the day, Niranjan Raman. Niranjan is a chartered accountant from ICI with over 2 decades of experience in audit and account advisory. He had a brief experience of 1.5 years as an industry head at the industries also. His specialization is in the last decade has been in the financial reporting and IFRS and Ind AS. His significant part of his knowledge having been acquired by assisting clients in gap transition. Niranjan takes keen interest in tracking the governance matter, which includes code of ethics, and that's why he is here today. He is a published author and contributed to to a project in the IFRS Foundation for preparing educational material on IFRS for SMEs, and helped drafting comments to exposure drafts issued by the ICI. He is currently a partner in JA Associates, and he is also expanding his domain into ESG and sustainability. It's a pleasure to introduce Niranjan to all of you, and welcome to you, Niranjan. Thank you for being here. Over to you.
Good evening, everybody. Okay. Wednesday evening, midweek. A lot of registrations I heard, about 40-50% have turned up or are sitting here. So again, good evening to you all.
Good evening.
Still doesn't sound like 40. Good evening to all.
Good evening.
Okay, that's more. Thanks. So we start today's session, and it's about code of ethics. As you all know, I was told that it's a full house, and they're going to stop the spot registrations and all of that. So I think the chairman has been kind enough to allow a few people because they landed here not knowing that spot will not be allowed. Having said that, I was like he said, wondering why so much, but I realized that it's a mandatory session. But later I also heard that maybe he has to announce it, I should steal the thunder, but I can't hold it. I think they're going to have these sessions regularly rather than just once or twice a year as it used to be earlier to avoid the rush so people can spread it out. But for those of you who registered here, come here, I think that will be great today. So, looking at the topic of ethics, the code of ethics, it's such a vast topic. There's so much to cover, so much to know, and as they say, ethics is something which is not what you learn in a classroom. I'm sure all of us know that, have heard that, have experienced that, because the challenge that we face on being ethical is to a much lesser extent in a classroom. I won't say it's not there in a classroom, right? Because I know there are still people who probably sign and just walk out. Which is not the right thing to do, but at least for an ethics session. But then it's much more when we, as chartered accountants, go out and go, engage in our practice. And as Chairman Pramod also said, there's this startup event which is happening, and given that startups are generally less formal, and our Bangalore market is full of them, and of course in the recent past we've seen many issues with startups, with governance kind of issues and ethical issues. This topic also becomes very important for us because it's something where we have to be very tuned on what is right, what's wrong, and obviously not everything is right or wrong, and there are grey areas in how we handle that. So I think day by day it's a topic which acquires more and more relevance. It is so vast. So when I was initially invited about a month ago to take up this session, I was like, okay, which part of ethics should we deal with? And I had one or two rounds of discussion. I think the message then, or the request then I got was focus a little more on something like no clerk, which is a relatively new provision, and it even impacts members in the industry, not just practicing CAs. And even for practicing CAs, it actually raises the bar, because we always had the SA 250, which was on an auditor's responsibility to look at compliance with laws and regulations as a part of the audit. But beyond that, what more, right? So that's where I think no clerk or the non-compliance with laws and regulations, which is a section that's been brought into the code of ethics, has a lot of relevance. So that's one topic we'll be taking up. And I'll just move to the agenda right now. And also we touch upon some important updates. What I've tried to do is made it a little more in a quiz form so that it can be engaging, and I would love to hear you all shout out the answers, which are more like MCQ. Now, of course, our institute has also moved to MCQ in the examination format, right? Apparently that's quite challenging. It really gets to the depth of testing the understanding of principle and the application. So I think MCQ is here to stay, and I've brought that in here. Another area which I'm going to be touching upon is on the website and online services which chartered accountants can provide, which would be, again, with technology being there so much, with clients wanting to look at your website first before they talk to you. This is a very important aspect on how we portray ourselves, right? So while the institute, as Pramod mentioned, has liberalized some of the things on having a signboard outside your office, or maybe a few things even on the advertisement part, and there's a lot more, as I understand, which is being discussed and is deliberated, because obviously there has to be an Indian Big Four, as was mentioned here earlier, and as the Prime Minister said 7 years ago, or whatever, and Finance Minister said recently. I think it will mean that there has to be a lot of aggregation of firms, there has to be a multidisciplinary practice kind of thing, and there will have to be obviously a lot of advertisement also to put the word out in the market on who can do what. But it has to be fair, and definitely the institute is considering that. However, in the meanwhile, there have been one or two aspects which have actually come out as a relaxation when it comes comes to advertising, when it comes to the website, there are still restrictions, and of course those need to still be there, as I'm sure all of us agree, because we are in professional services. And we'll see what some of those are. I've tried to make it a little more interactive, so this query kind of a thing. So we'll go through that. And then very briefly I'll talk to you about, or I'll show you what the go-to resources are. I've just put about 4 or 5 things over there, but there are numerous things that you can look up. So why do we think we need ethics, right? So I got just 2 pictures in my mind when I asked this question to myself. And one picture was this, which is our own institute's emblem and the motto and philosophy behind it, if I may say. And the other is this. And I was just showing, looking at the slides with Pramod, and he said, what's this? I mean, I want to put people to sleep. And I was like, probably. but then the intent here is not to put you to sleep in the classroom. It is more to give the message that ethics is what keeps sounding. Having good ethics, doing the right things at the right time. And at the right time is very important when we speak of something like a no class. And I'll talk a little more about it later. But doing the right thing at the right time is very important for us to sleep well, like a baby. And what's the connection of our motto and the thing which says Yesha Suttesh Jagrati, which is of course in the Upanishads, as all of us know. It is something which speaks of somebody who's awake. And obviously the expectation there is that we are always awake. And when we are awake, we notice things which are right, which are wrong, grey areas. And navigating through ethics is a very critical part of our profession. And that's where, though the two kind of contradict with each other, with one talking about somebody being awake, and I'm telling you, okay, you're going to sleep peacefully. Being awake will, at the right time, will help you to sleep well when you need to sleep. So, I thought I'll kind of make the discussion about why ethics a little more pictorial over here. Okay, so the next thing is about who drives the setting of regulations related to ethics, and of course there are numerous regulators which we as CAs are exposed to, but just listed on a few who have a direct bearing on what we do and the ethics that we need to follow and the standards or the guidance which is set for us. And of course the ICI, which is our parent body, which gives us the accreditation, the membership, has a very significant role to play. It's got very active in terms of either the disciplinary committee and the disciplinary action on CAs and all of that, and also in terms of specifying and coming out with a lot of FAQs and a lot of guidance on what needs to be done. Of course, one of the more important things is also about the new Code of Ethics itself, which was published about 3 to 4 years ago, and we'll see that in the next slide. But there's been a lot that's been happening in the past decade almost, right? And that's because the world is changing so much, and it's imperative that we need to rewrite the guidance and the way we look at ethics. The MCA, of course, is in some ways the parent, or if I may say, the sponsor body of our institute and of our profession at large. And they do have an active role. They also become very active in terms of looking at how professionals operate, be it chartered accountants or even company secretaries or cost accountants or the management CMAs, and also the directors of companies. Right? So there's a lot that's happening in the regulatory space, and of course NAFRA is the biggest one who's making a lot of news and recommendations and orders and everything which people have really woken up to now. When NAFRA was formed a few years ago, almost a decade ago, people were like, okay, what's this meant for? And is it CA Institute versus NAFRA? But I think the lines are getting pretty clear now on who has to do what. The courts have also settled some of the positions that you might have seen recently. And there's a lot of activity happening with all these regulators. Of course, besides this, there's a judicial system, the high courts, the Supreme Court from time to time, looking at what's happening and giving their orders and their views is also binding on us, and that's changing the regulatory scene and the guidance around ethics and all. Globally, the regulators, as I'm sure most of you would know, is the International Ethics Standard Board, which sets the global code of ethics, and to a large extent in India, we align with ISDA and the standards of the code what they have issued. Just like we've been aligning on the GAP and the GAS, also the accounting standards and auditing standards with the IASB or the IWSB. So also in here, I think we're getting aligned because it's a globalized world, and the best practices of the entire world are being brought into India. Of course, with the tailoring and customization that we need. Maybe some of them will take a little longer to get there, but to the extent that they need to be applied now, they already come into force. Again, I go back to Nokla as one example where we are not very much behind the rest of the world in adopting some of these changes which will define what our profession does. And of course, the PCOB is another body which is very well known in the US to regulate the listed company auditors, the body company or company oversight board. They've also been very active, passing a lot of orders, making a lot of comments on how audit firms actually operate, picking up issues which deal with independence, ethics, etc. And since you're all sitting in a training, I'm sure some of you might have heard this, but not all. There have been orders which are passed by PCOB about people attending trainings or about rather taking up tests which are mandatory, right? And there have been certain firms or certain practicing CPAs, accountants in the US and certain other parts of the world who come under the PCOB jurisdiction because they are audit listed companies in the US. So there have been certain orders against professionals for what's called as cheating in the exam, right? Because you've got an online learning system where you need to undergo an e-learn of a certain number of hours, and at the end of it take a test and clear that test and put up those results, right, to get your CP credits and continue to have your license. But there have been cases where people prepare an answer sheet and circulate that and adopt other means which are not fair, and therefore it's like cheating in an exam, and which means that they're not serious about taking up the e-learns and trainings which require you to be professionally updated, which require you to maintain the highest ethical standards, and therefore these obviously have come out through whistleblowers and through other means, and there have been sanctions and orders passed. Right? So it's much more evolved over there in certain jurisdictions. India is catching up on a lot of fronts, and the reason I'm telling this is because it is obviously going to come in here also at some point in time. Right? Not as late as it used to maybe a decade ago, but sooner than that, which means the gap between something like this happening globally in a different country, in some of the jurisdictions where it's considered mature or advanced in terms of how the profession works, versus the way it is in India, it's the gap of bringing that into India is much narrower today. We used to sit on accounting standards which were like dated and 20 years old at one time, but today we are pretty much aligned with what the rest of the world is adopting, right, in IFRS, and we kind of apply that in Indians. So similarly, I see that happening eventually even for the ethical standards. Not eventually, it's already started happening, and some of these are things which we need to take seriously in our country as well, among our professional community as well. So I mentioned about the changes which have been happening, right, in the profession, and about the code of ethics which has got rewritten. So there was the 11th publication which last existed from 2009 until 2019, and it got rewritten, and the 12th edition which got released. So this is a quiz question where I just want you to take a guess on how many pages was the old code of ethics versus how much is the new one. So what's the right answer? A, B, C? B. Can everybody see the B? B. Okay, so somebody says it's like doubled. Okay? I would dare anybody to go for C after me speaking for 15-20 minutes. I know that's not an answer. Any other answers? E, C, A. The reason why I put this is just to show the magnitude of how it's changed, right? And technically or arithmetically, there may not be a very significant difference between A and B. Though A looks like it's become a bit thicker. I mean, in relative terms, if we see, it's more than doubled. Okay, so the answer is A. So the 12th edition, which was published between 2019 and 20, and that's more than doubled, number one. Number two, it doesn't end there. The institute has been coming out with a lot of other guidance in the form of FAQs, clarifications, announcements, and it just doesn't end there. There's still a lot that's going on, and we can expect in the next few years. And besides this, like I mentioned, there have been a lot of other regulatory actions or regulatory orders and High Court, Supreme Court orders, which has only added to the amount of literature and guidance and the care and attention we need to give to this topic. Okay, I'll just get out of very specific focus on what all is changing in the world of ethics. But this is another area where, something has changed, I can say. Financial website has changed. Here's the answer. Is there any guidance on the dimension, color specification, etc. for CA phone? iPhone? Is there any guidance on the size? Like how big can you have the font size? What color background should it be? How should you light it up? Somebody who has an office at the ground floor versus somebody who has on a 10th floor. We've seen a lot more skyscrapers in India, or at least taller buildings, if not skyscrapers, right? From 2009 to 2019 to 2024, where we are now. So this was an area which had to be relooked, right? And the correct answer is no. It is obviously this is something which the institute, in its wisdom, and very correctly in my view, decided that there should not be restrictions or regulations about how you do it. What size you keep it and what color and all of that. But it's not a free pass because it does come with some professional standards that you need to maintain to the extent that you can't make it flashy. You can't use like glow lights, which somebody like a trading or a sales establishment would typically do, right? Because at the end of the day, a professional service firm, you need to be a little sober. That's why if you saw my first slide, for those who were already in that, I started off with sober. Yeah. So the other thing, the next question that I have, we CAs have also become very tech savvy. We put up a lot of things online, on YouTube, on other social media, where we want to give educational videos, want to share our ज्ञान with the whole world. Can that be done? And are there any restrictions around it? There's something about it. Yes, obviously. A lot of people do. But what's the answer, ladies?
C.
Yeah. So, what are the conditions? Some people shouted C. Which is the right answer?
Front main.
Sorry? Who's that? Should we get a mic here? Can raise your hand. So what would be the conditions?
Not advertise.
It should not be an ad.
Advertise the practice.
It's audit firm main.
Very good. We should not advertise in any way. So if I do an educational video, sorry.
You should not be solicited.
it should not be soliciting, you should not advertise. So if I do an educational video on some topic, let's say the budget's going to come out next month or the day after next month, I prepare a video and give my analysis of budget, put that up. It should just be that which is for registration purpose. I can't go beyond that to say that, okay, by the way, I also provide you this tax services, or I can help you with structuring, or I can do whatever, come out, and that would be solicitation. Or I can't advertise anything else, like for example, this is my firm where I have so many partners and we have so many specialists, and we've been doing these kind of services. We give representations to government on what should go in the budget, right? These kind of things which potentially tantamount to soliciting or to kind of projecting the firm more as an advertisement is something which should not be done. So we've we've got into the domain of online educational videos and the online communications that we do. Let's move ahead. Okay. So if you have a CA firm where there is somebody with a partner and that person, he or she could also be a partner in multiple other firms, right? It does happen. So when you have a visiting card of such a partner, can they print the names of all the firms on the card? This does happen. 2-3 firms. There are some people who are common partners across all the firms. Right?
I think that's a solicitation. I think that becomes a solicitation.
It's solicitation. So see, a lot of people here have written a CA exam, been groomed by traditional principles, and we think that's what it is. But actually, the institute has clarified this in a recent FAQ, saying that it is permitted. It doesn't really violate Schedule 1, Part 1, Clause 7 provisions. Right? Because at the end of the day, you're actually not soliciting anything. You're just making a statement of fact that I'm there in so many firms. I'm not saying you come and give business to all these firms, or I'm not saying that this firm's for tax, we are specialists, this firm's for audit, we are specialists, this firm I do consulting. You're not doing that. You're just making a statement of fact that I'm associated with these 3 firms or 2 firms. So that is permitted. Now how did I get all this? Where did I get this information from? Any guesses? I have a slide in the end talking of the resources, your go-to resources of MSA. Alright, man up on some of these.
Websites and then mail.
Yeah, no. Why could I get to know? See, because a lot of people here don't seem to know or acknowledge the fact that you can put multiple firm names on a card. Right? So how would you get to know if such a change is happening?
Some case files.
Yes. Okay. How else? And where would you find that case? Okay, let me give it out. So the institute, as I said, has not only come up with the code of ethics, which will take more than 2.5 times into previous edition, but they are also very active in releasing FAQs and clarifications and announcements. And so this is one of the most recent FAQs which has come, and it's available on the website. So if you go on the institute website, you have the page for the ethical standard code, ESP, where all these are listed and you can find it there. Okay. So it's a very interesting one, and we've got time at the end of this session. I can actually open that on my mobile and just go through a few. There are some which can actually be a surprise to us. So we move them in that way. Okay. So we spoke of the online world. Let's now get to how, as practitioners, we can use the online medium. We can use the technology in our practice. So there is a lot of guidance around website design and the algorithms we use, and it basically says that we can use a pull model and not a push model, right? Which means people have to actually pull you out of the internet and say, oh, okay, you're there, and let me go and visit this person who's a CA, or let me give a call to this firm, right? So you should pull out the information rather than they be pushed to pick you up. So that's the pull and push angle And how does this pull-push system work? Right? So if I've got, if I just open Google and I just type saying that, okay, find me a CA firm who can be my tax consultant for, let's say, a merger, right? There are two ways it can happen. One is there can be certain organizations, not necessarily CA firms, there could be even advisory companies where, because there may be CAs or lawyers who actually structure themselves in a company rather than in a partnership firm. And in certain professions or with a corporate firm, if you are not being regulated by the ICI, you could potentially pay for a sponsored ad, right, or for a sponsored search result where you actually land up on top. And Google tweaks its algorithms to put you up higher in the order, right? So there, the person who's searching is actually getting pushed when click your link first. And that's something which is not allowed. And instead, what should happen is pull that by our merits. And Google also has a different algorithm where people haven't paid them. It would actually see, you know, in the whole vast internet, who's got the most number of hits, whose page is most visited, and whatever other different criteria, basis which, you know, Google actually prioritizes and orders that who's got the latest updates, you know, which is the latest website. I mean, a 10-year-old website or a 10-year-old portal will have a lesser probability or chance of coming on top if there's somebody who's like 10 days old, right? And who's also getting that traction on internet. So we don't control that algorithm, and people just get pulled there through whatever other means. So that's a very important thing to follow when it comes to your pull and push model. And of course, the design of the website itself, we spoke of it, just like the signboard. It is not something which can be an advertisement, which can be flashy to kind of pull traffic. And in fact, some of you might have seen law firms have it to a large extent, and even CA firms have started putting it where as soon as you get into a portal, into their website, you get a pop-up which is a kind of a disclaimer, and where you need to agree on the terms and conditions with which you are getting into their website. You tick the box and say okay, and only then it allows it. If you read those terms and conditions, some of the terms over there are like, okay, you agree that we are not soliciting business from you. So some of these are safeguards that people have built as a good practice to ensure that they're taking the confidence of the person visiting the website to confirm that it's more a pull model which is bringing them there. And there is some information which is permitted on the website, some information which is not permitted. So there's a long list which I've just put here, but you know, it's very basic information, very factual information, I would say, like what's the name of the firm or the member who runs the firm, or the trade name, though technically we don't have trade names, but the trade name could be that you've done something like XYZ, LLP, where X, Y, and Z are the first initial of the partner's name or surname. So that would be a trade name and also a firm name. You can have the year of establishment mentioned there, you can have contact information so that obviously people can write an email or call you, what are the kind of services you render. So the basic information which anybody needs to know to get in touch with you and to engage you is what you can put up on the website. You can also be detailed about partners, the employees, how many of them, their names, and the number of articles you have. But again, it has to be in a way where you don't solicit or you don't put things over there to market the firm or yourselves as a business. A couple of other interesting things considering so many changes in technology that have happened and the avenues which have opened up for CAs. If you have any third-party platforms, right, where you may be called as an expert or consultant to give a point of view, or there's a chat box which you actually run, can you do that? Right? Like for example, it could be banks or NBFCs or even some newspapers. You would have seen that newspapers have a column on financial matters, on tax matters. So you can actually write editorial, you know, somebody sold some property and he or she is an NRI and you know there's capital gain or repatriate money or you know those kind of questions. And there will be an answer given to it, and the CA could be involved in that. Right? So that is something which happens, and we have to admit that it's something which all of us see, and all of us can probably have an opportunity to actually go into and do. But are there any guidelines around it? The answer is yes. So similarly, it can happen even in the online media. And the answer is yes, there are guidelines. Again, it should not be something which results in solicitation or advertisement. You can give an answer and probably stop there and not say that, okay, I'm going to give those services, or I'm an expert in that, or I've done it for so many people. I've got offices in so many locations. All these would kind of be indicators of saying that you're marketing the services and not just mentioning the services. So that's one. And so there are certain safeguards, and also it should have advertisement, as I said, and it should not also constitute any form of misrepresentation. Where, for example, somebody gets an impression that you are more closely attached or tagged with that organization, right? But the lines get blurred between a newspaper and you as a chartered accountant or your firm. Right? The firm is not a part of that arrangement, is what it should be. So most people actually, even though they give a view there, they give it as their own view rather than a firm's view. The next interesting thing is, how many of you have heard of Upwork? That's just one example. Raise hands, please. Okay. Handful of you. I'm not going to ask you if you actually put yourself up on it. So, can somebody say what is Upwork? Among the people who raised their hand. Please, you make it a little open and right. So what's Upwork? Sorry?
Portal for freelance jobs.
Right. Portal for freelance jobs.
Is it something like urban company or similar model?
Urban company, yeah. So one of the first things when I heard about Upwork was that it's the Uber of professionals, right? So anybody who wants to engage you, actually you put yourself up and give your profile, and you get ratings for whatever you're doing on it, and people approach and they ask you a query which you answer, and your bank account is tagged to Upwork, and they pay, and the money hits your account. Right? Very interesting, right? All of us have so many skills, so much knowledge. We can sit at home and do. I actually know somebody who's a company secretary who does that, and I don't know, it's okay or not in the CS circles, and she actually suggested to me that I should. It didn't sound right to me, and I've not done it. But then, can you do such things? Now that he said it doesn't sound right. So the guidance there again is that you shouldn't, because it's not permissible for members to list yourselves. And this is again there in one of the FAQs which the ICI has issued. Because then you become more like mass service provider, and not like a professional who should solicit business or advertise. Right? So I mean, typically, like you said, urban company. Do you want to be associated with the kind of jobs and tasks that urban company does? People from urban company come into this dignity of labor. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to say that something is more, something is less. What they do is also a very important job for the society and for their living. But is a professional, somebody who should actually go and do that. So as Pramod and Kavita were here, and I was speaking to them before the session, the chairman and the secretary. One of the things that came up in our discussion was that a lot of people up to the present generation are of the mindset that our work should speak for ourselves. We shouldn't market, we shouldn't be very overtly asking for work. Right? People will come to us if you go to the job. So some of that is the philosophy which is still behind these kind of decision views that the institute has. To change at some point in time, but it's what it is. And Upwork, by the way, is just one example. There are actually numerous sites. There's something called Fiverr, and there's something called Guru, which I think is an Indian website itself. So we can look up, but just be cautious if say, practicing network or kind of enroll on that, then that could be a non-compliance with code. So we come back to quiz because we've touched one topic, got a couple of questions, and then we move to another topic. So this is again an interesting one. If you're a CA who has to accept a client, and all of us know that there's a requirement for an NOC from the previous auditor, and if you get to know that the previous auditor was a sole practitioner, right? He didn't have a firm or partner or anybody else go to it. Unfortunately, that person is passed away. How would you manage the communication with the previous auditor? You conclude that there's no communication required, or should you inform that person's family, legal heirs, whoever? Or will you just use your professional judgment and then, okay, I'll write to ICAI or I'll do my 81 filing saying that, I couldn't complete, or would you do anything? How do you handle it? Maybe a very rare instance. Generally, we don't come across. Sorry? Judgment. So here again, the FAQs come with a response saying that it's A, which means that you don't need to communicate to anyone. Sorry, that's the wrong answer. The explanation, but yeah, I'll explain to you. I think that's going to come out elsewhere. It's part of the future, but I think the answer there is the ICA has also taken a legal opinion and it says that when there's been death of a member, there's no one for you to communicate. So you just go ahead and accept it. But according to the legal opinion, you also need to confirm and do certain checks to confirm that this person has actually passed away, and upon death, the auditor changes have been coming over to you. Which there are many ways in which you can find out. Yes, so there is an element of skepticism again and judgment that can be raised. Okay. So the other thing is if a member in practice is also visiting as guest lecturer or faculty in some educational institution and receives honorary. Is that okay? It's on a per class basis. So is it like accepting a contingent fee? Or is it not a permitted like doing an alternate profession between practice while teaching and teaching? Or is this allowed?
It is permitted.
I'm sure there are people who would, maybe some of you here. Yeah. So are there any restrictions or conditions that you need to comply with?
To keep informed institute.
Sorry?
To keep informed institute.
Keep the institute informed, yes, maybe. And also, sorry, I think that's very small, but I can talk you through it. There's a cap that you can do it for up to 25 hours per week, right? Which is almost 50% of the time. I mean, if it's somebody who works 6 days a week with 8 hours a day, that's 48, round up to 50, and you can do 25. Which means that if you go below 50% in terms of your practice time, then you're not a full-time practitioner. You can still justify this 50% because of the fact that what you're teaching is from your practical experience, and while addressing a group of students or whoever's the audience, you also learn, right? You learn a lot by teaching and by taking classes. So it enhances your ability to face a client or to do a practice better. So it is something which is okay, but there's a limit to it. You can't cross that limit, which is 25 hours per week. Okay. We also see this a lot nowadays online. Right? There have been people who go and do a lot of equity research, and so some startup is getting listed, they do a valuation and they put it up online on YouTube or LinkedIn, wherever, and they give a point of view on what they think about the valuation or the pricing at which the company is being put up. Or even generally, not just an IPO, even where in the stock market, analysis of a certain company, certain portfolio of companies or whatever. So is that allowed? It is, because people do it. Or other people who are doing it not doing the right thing. They're not it. Yes. Are there any conditions? Or is it like free for all? See, obviously, anything you do because you're a professional comes attached with conditions, right? You can't just have a free pass. There's no absolute right when it comes to practice. And the answer here is, sorry, I think the answer got mixed up between this and the other one. The answer here is that you could do that. You could be so long as you're stopping it with an analysis and an advice, which is not resulting in, or it's not recommending or suggesting some kind of a retail action, right? Which is like you give a buy-sell recommendation. So if you do an analysis and say, okay, this is the valuation I see for the company, and okay, this is the value at which it's being traded in the market or it's going on an IPO, and just stop there, that's fine. But if you say that, oh, because of this, I believe that you shouldn't, or oh, because of this, you should actually buy because it's only going to go up after another 3 months, then actually you're not doing your job as a chartered accountant, and this is not where you should be. But move on and take up that as a profession, right? So basically, the answer there is you should. It conflicts with the profession, and as a professional, you should be only one professional. There's no part-time job, and it should be something which conflicts or contradicts, and therefore you should. Of course, there can be other conditions also or restrictions. Like for example, if it is a client of yours, they're providing some services, audit, tax, consulting, whatever. Then also you need to be careful because you potentially have a lot more of inside information, unpublished price-sensitive information, and using any of that in doing your analysis, your valuations can potentially will actually become a non-compliance, right? Will actually become an unethical thing because you're using data which nobody else has access to derive a value or do something and put it out. Impinging on your client's confidentiality. Okay, this is an interesting one. We all know, and I've said it more than once, that you can't advertise. But still I'm bringing up this question. So you can a firm advertise on a specific occasion like silver, gold, and platinum ceremony celebration? So, is this allowed? ABC? Yes? No? Subject to conditions? By now I think I've become quite routine in doing this as a subject to conditions. But why is it you're allowed when, let's talk about the rationale. Why is it it's allowed when you meet a certain milestone? Okay. Here there's a certain rationale which is being put in by the ICI, which is that these are very special events or occasions which will also help people to socialize, right? And it is for celebrating an institution which has got created, right? And typically, if you think 25 years, 50 years, there will be a lot of attrition. People would have moved out, but they'll still have a lot of attachment to say that this is an institution where I work, and this person also worked there. We should meet up. We should celebrate. And more to facilitate such things, because we live in a society where people should celebrate occasions. This is apparently allowed, and this is also something which is new, and it was a bit of a revelation for me also, because it's come in one of the more recent FAQs which have been issued by the Ethical Standards Board. Right? But of course, it is subject to conditions, because it should again not amount to advertising or become solicitation, which
you end up doing. So we were discussing this, and Kavita was actually mentioning, obviously advertising is not allowed, and like I mentioned earlier, our generation is still that generation where we believe that our work should talk about us and we don't go and sell by advertising, etc. But then, yeah, this is a bit of a surprise. And my thought or response which spontaneously came is, this, for somebody who's crossed 25 years, 50 years, they would have built such a reputation already in the market, right? And that's why they've stayed there for so long, and they would have had 2-3 generations of partners, or maybe more, who actually grown in the firm and passed through their portals, right? And it's a lot of pride. So, does somebody who's got to that level actually need to advertise? So it's like, I'll use a Kannada phrase or a proverb where they say, "Hallidaga kadle irlilla, kadle idaga hallilla." It's like, I had to advertise in the first 5 years, first 10 years when I was there, but I wasn't allowed. And now, I've got everything. Why do I need to advertise? Which means that you probably don't have that need, and that's why a lot of people feel that, okay, it's allowed, but why would somebody do it? It can be done only for a matter of pride that we've crossed a milestone and we want to get together, have our alumni come together, etc. That's the thought. Okay. So now let's move back into technical topics. How is it so far? Any feedback? Are people finding it relevant, interesting? Okay, good. Fine. So we'll talk about NOCLAR, right? And again, when I was planning for this session, I met up with Pramod once and discussing what kind of topics we should take, because ethics is such a vast area. If the Bangalore branch is going to have regular sessions on this topic, I'm sure they can cover it over a period of time, but what should be the priority? And he did mention to me NOCLAR being one, and some of the recent changes and FAQs being something else to consider. And so I brought in about 3-4 slides around NOCLAR. So can I just do a poll with show of hands? How many of you are familiar with the provisions of NOCLAR? Okay, some of you have already started reading it, and so be it. You're getting familiar. How many are familiar with NOCLAR, non-compliance with laws and regulations? Okay, very few. It's okay. So that's why we are here and we are covering it in the session, because that was a sense that a lot of people might not have touched upon this topic. It's obviously, for most of us in this room, we have not studied it as a part of our exam. And the way it happens in our profession is, at least for me, when I qualified over 2 decades ago, I got a gift from the CA Institute, wrapped in that brown cardboard paper of those days. And I was like, wow, I got a gift, let me open and see, and it was about ethics. Right? They actually sent me 2-3 volumes of one booklet about case laws and 3 volumes of ethics. And somebody who I know actually was there at that time at home, and they said, oh, Yubanta Netiku. So, sorry, that's against Kannada, which means Netiku is like, keep it aside. Okay. For those of you who need the translation. But, so that's the way people used to view it, right? And I'm sure a lot of us, after we've passed CA, would not very regularly keep ourselves updated on what's happening in this space, because none of the clients ask us, right? Reading about ethics doesn't get you new business. You have to live ethics and then you get business. But why should I read? That's the mindset. And I think that's where people lose out on some of these changes which have happened and which can create an exposure for us. And non-compliance with laws and regulations is one such area where it's a very defining moment. It's a very important phase in our profession where we will be forced to be more ethical, be forced to give more importance to compliance. We will be forced to show our clients the right place if they're kind of crossing the line on laws and regulations. Why do I say that? Because any non-compliance with laws and regulations by our clients need to be reported by us as a chartered accountant. And Pramod in the beginning asked, and he mentioned in the context of Nokla, okay, how many of you are members in the industry, right? Not in practice. I don't think anybody raised their hand at that time. I don't know if there's anyone who's a member in the industry now. Possibly not, still, but that's okay. But the new requirement, one very defining moment here, and as Pramod also said that, earlier as a CA you were being forced to comply with a lot of things, but the management wouldn't, or they would get away. The CFO has done some goof up or done some non-compliance. The person just leaves the organization and finds a job on another place, right? That can still happen even now. But Nokla is changing that way. If that person is a CA, that person needs to know that they are accountable for anything that's happening under their watch. Right? So it's just not the auditor's responsibility. Again, if I have to draw a parallel, the same thing is happening to a large extent in accounting also, as you have an audit. Right? You had certain auditing standards. You had a CARO report that had to prepare on fiscal verification of fixed assets or on title or whatever. There have been a lot of changes in Schedule 3 also, which now require the management to kind of make disclosures, which talk to what you are putting in your audit report or in your CARO. Right? So the management responsibility is significantly increasing. The board responsibility is significantly increasing. And that's where the ICAI has also come to say that the compliance with laws and regulations is something that the management or any members of the institute, particularly for senior professionals, should be held accountable for. And they should follow these principles. Right? So it's become applicable from 1st October 22, because the view and the philosophy here is that there is a self-interest or an intimidation threat to your principles of integrity and professional behavior if, as a professional accountant, you become aware of any non-compliance. Okay, the second bullet is what I'm reading, and that's a very important one, because that says that if you get to know something's going wrong, you need to speak up about it, and if you don't, then it is a threat to who you are as a person. Either you are getting intimidated, you are scared, oh, I'll lose this client, or maybe in other parts of the country, not so much in Bangalore perhaps, but somebody's going to come and thrash me and probably kill me for putting this in my report or raising this issue with the shareholders in their report or the board of directors, right? So that is to do with the intimidation threat. The other is a self-interest threat, where effectively it means that you are interested yourself and therefore you are just keeping quiet, shutting up and not opening up about it and making an issue out of it, which you should have, because there is that non-compliance, right? So this is a very important angle of looking at it. And was this not required earlier for auditors, for chartered accountants? Because, like I mentioned in the beginning, there's also this SA 250, the standards on auditing, which talks of compliance with laws and regulations, right? So how is this different from that? How is the scenario changed? So SA 250 to a large extent was limited to what you do as an auditor during the course of the audit, which is giving an opinion on financial statements, which means you look at the fact as to whether, or you use your judgment to say whether this impacts the financial statements in any material way, and if it did, you would qualify, otherwise you won't. At best, given emphasis of matter or UN, under certain circumstances, and nothing beyond that. But now that's not enough, because it is just not that it impacts your financial statements, even if it does not impact the financial statements, but it can impact the operations of the company in some significant way, of your client in some significant way. Then you need to make a report out of it, right? Whom do you report to? You report it to, there's a certain hierarchy, you report it to those charged with governance to see if they can take corrective action and sort it out. If they can't, or if they will listen to you, or if their response to you is not convincing, then you would escalate it, right? And all the way up to even reporting it to the government, to the MCA. All of us know there's also the SFI, right? It's Serious Fraud Investigation Office. So report it to them. So there are many avenues, there are many expectations on how we need to do. And as of now, this is applicable only to listed companies above 50 crores of net worth. Because in a country like India, you can't roll it out to everybody at once, right? All of us know as professionals that knowingly or unknowingly, there will be transgressions, there will be non-compliances, which we would have noted at our clients. And it's like pick the bigger ones first and clean it up, and then people get used to it and bring it down. Right? Implementation of anything typically happens that way, right? You have to prioritize where to start, and that's where, as of now, there's a certain threshold, certain category of companies, but don't be surprised. Don't assume it won't happen. This is sure to stay, and it will happen in the next 5 to 10 years is what I can probably foresee. Maybe sooner than that. To a large extent, it depends maybe on the what's going to happen next Tuesday. Yeah. The election results. All these are policies of certain government, which you don't know how another government or the same government will look at when they come back. But not to make a political statement, but at the end of the day, it is something which whoever comes will be there, will stay. Okay. Sorry, is that visible or is it too small? It's too small, I'm sorry. Okay, so here is just an overview of what NOCLAR is, which I think I've covered in the previous slide. It talks a little about the reporting stages, which I already mentioned. That it was reported to those charged with governance, and then to shareholders, and then to government itself. One dilemma that you may have is about confidentiality over here, right? Because it is client confidential information, and if I have to go and tell the government, is that okay? Is the client going to sue me? Right? Because you know that the client has done something which is not right, let's say, while doing certain calculations or assumptions or some benchmarking, transfer pricing or whatever else, and valuation. They've done something which is not okay, and you know it's not okay, and it involves very proprietary information, very confidential information. And actually going and writing a letter or disclosing that to the government can potentially become a confidentiality issue. So should you do that? And which is where the guidance here is that, of course, it does involve a lot of professional judgment. You need to decide whether you can and you will or you should do it. But be very careful in exercising that judgment. Look at the larger public interest, the national interest, rather than just your client and one company or one organization. Right? So that's the dilemma on confidentiality, which is addressed as a part of the guidance that's available. And of course, it also speaks of materiality. That's the point 5 which I'm speaking of. I think other things are more or less covered in the earlier slides. And in the interest of time, I'll also touch upon the 5th one, which speaks of materiality, where of course here it says that you don't need to report something if it is insignificant, trivial, immaterial, right? So cash defalcation by cashier of 5,000 rupees is always immaterial. But 5,000 rupees which was taken and just given to a CFO or a CEO for no reason is a much more serious issue, right? That's a governance issue. So there's a qualitative as well as a quantitative materiality. So this is with laws and regulations. So what are some of the examples of laws and regulations which maybe we haven't been very focused on in the past, but we need to pay more attention? One is of course things like fraud, bribery, corruption, which I hope is on a decreasing trend in India, as a lot of people say, and I think we are also experiencing. To a large extent also because of better governance happening through automation, through technology. If you have to file your returns, or if you have to get an assessment done or get your refund, it no longer involves some of these, right? That's just as a simple example. And of course many other areas also. But nevertheless it does still exist, and that is a non-compliance because there are anti-corruption laws, and there's always this debate and discussion and judgments about is it the fault of the bribe giver or the bribe taker, right? Without getting into all that, anything like this which has happened in a client or a company which you're auditing would be, or a company where you're working if you're a member in the industry, would be a non-compliance with those laws relating to anti-corruption and anti-bribery. Right? So that is something which you might have to report. Benami money laundering, of course, there's been a lot of overall on this legislation in the past 3 to 5 years, and that's an area to look out for. Data protection, privacy laws, this is again a very evolving topic globally as well as in India, and any non-compliance there may not very apparently connect with your financial statements and the impact on financial statements, but it can even bring down companies, right? It can even bring down business or a part of the business. Like for example, we've seen a very large fintech company whose payments bank had to be shut down because they were not doing proper KYCs, right? Or they were not adequately safeguarding some of the information of their customers or whatever it may be. So some of that come in the domain of data. Environmental protection, again, there have been companies who suffered a lot. Maybe even one plant gets shut, it has a material impact on their operations. So such things would have to get reported. Tax, corporate restructuring, anything which is happening. Again, it's a very fine line between tax avoidance, tax evasion, tax planning. Without getting into that debate, but we need to be more mindful now because of the fact that there is something called NOCLAR. Okay? And anything you suspect is not right there, or you feel is not right, has to be viewed from the NOCLAR lens to say, okay, what next should I report to someone? Public health and safety issues. We are seeing a lot again about things like FSSAI and baby products being adulterated, baby food being adulterated, or a lot of sugar content in it, or all these kind of things, which are to do with public health, safety. And you have a company doing that, it's your client, and you may think that, oh, it's not going to impact my financials. They're going to reduce the sugar percentage in it by 5 basis points. They'll be compliant, or even now they're compliant, but why should I bother about it? But we should be open to some of these issues which are actually coming up in our society, in our markets. Banking, securities markets, financial products, services, again, a lot of mis-selling that happens, a lot of regulatory requirements which keep coming every now and then. So keeping track of it and seeing whether your clients are compliant with all those changes is important. Prevention of organized crime, terrorism, again, all these link up with things like benami, money laundering. So being mindful of all this. Right? So this is mostly the content what I had planned, and I think I've covered to a large extent. I'll go to the next slide, which is like a punchline. When we talk so much about NOCLAR and so much of changes that are happening, yes, there are things where the profession has to scale up. The profession should be left a little more liberal, maybe on your signboard or in certain things about advertising or doing online practice and all of that. But there are far more serious things which are getting tightened, like the NOCLAR. And we should not forget this punchline statement, which is by our past president. Where, can you read it? Visible? Okay. So this is Devashish Mitra, which I'm sure all of you know, the past president of this institute, who said audit is a very serious business. Right? And I would slightly revert this to say not just audit, but being in practice or being a chartered accountant, not just doing an audit, even in the industry, is a very serious business. Stay away from it if you can't meet the expectation gap. Because some of these things what we discussed is the expectation today. And if anybody feels that no, it's not the way I used to do, or it's not the way my principal taught me when I did my articleship 15 years ago or 30 years ago, then we need to adapt and change and follow these today. Otherwise, it's going to create a lot of embarrassment and problem. Right? So that's I think the punchline, where it's very important for all of us to recognize that these things are here to stay, these things are ever changing. We need to keep ourselves continuously updated, and if we are not updated, there's always a risk that we may not follow some of these requirements. What I've given you is more a bird's eye view here of some of the provisions, including the NOTLA. There's a lot of material you can go back, read. Again, I spoke initially about the global standard setters or regulators, the IESPA. They have brought out papers and discussions and drafts and then standards on NOTLA almost a decade ago. Right? So there's been a lot of discussion, and it's a globalized world. A lot of our clients are either MNCs or the Indian companies which are going and doing operations abroad. So it's very important in a connected world that we know on these, and it is a serious business in a number of things. So we need to keep ourselves updated was one comment I made. How do we keep ourselves updated? I've just put up a few things over there. It may be very small, not very visible. I must admit I ran out of time a little bit, put a few more screenshots, and I think in the space was less here. But I think because it's an afterthought, I got that okay, I should put up a few things. But I don't know how many of you have actually seen this. I spoke about more than twice the size in terms of the Code of Ethics publication, the 12th edition. And that's come in 3 volumes, and each volume is about 250 to 300 pages. I think it's over 300 in one there. And the one you see below is a very interesting booklet that's been done in an FAQ format. In fact, both the things below are FAQ booklets. The one you see first over here, this is to do with the colored one. That's to do with some recent decisions on non-compliances with ethics and some recent guidance. Not just recent, but some of these are even a decade old, but you might not have noticed it. So it's very important to see. Of course, this is the clip from the Ethical Standards Board web page, which all of you can refer. All the recent updates keep coming up over there. Make it a point to see at least once in a quarter, right? If not more regularly. By the way, I don't know how many of you actually have seen it or read it actively. In the Institute's journal, there's always also every month there are 2 pages. I should have put that screenshot here, which I didn't. It says Know Your Ethics, right? It speaks of, again, in an FAQ format, they answer about 15-20 questions on what are the hot topics in ethics, what are the relevant contemporary topics. They usually pick up a theme and talk about that also. So there's a lot that is available to you to make use of it. So that's all I had planned for today. And if there are any questions, happy to take them on either what I've covered or if there's anything more also. While I say anything more, it's a vast ocean. And you may not be prepared for any of the questions. Try my best.
So, Michael. Questions?
Yeah, so I just have a question regarding Google. So Google Maps has this feature where you can add your location of your office. At the same time, there is a review section of the maps. I understand if the client gives a review voluntarily, it's fine. But would it be unethical if you ask the client to give a review after a service? Or maybe your friends, family who are also your clients, let's say you have worked for them, and would it be unethical if you ask them, you can give a review on this page?
Yeah, so see, clients, I've known some organizations who ask their employees to rate them.
Yeah.
Now, this is obviously a question where it's a grey area, if I may say, right? If you ask me, you're asking somebody to rate, the question is, can somebody actually demonstrate that you asked them? Asking them is still maybe okay, but if you ask them to rate you well, that's a different thing. That's the next level, right? So I'm saying, okay, Google has this feature and you can go do it, anybody's done it. And well, I do at times tell people to rate, So that, because that's one of the things which gets picked in the algorithm, right? To pull up your name.
Yeah, if
Somebody
somebody searches,
searching
yeah.
in Bangalore or in Vasant Nagar. I'm on a very specific pinpoint. In the 20 CA firms in Vasant Nagar, one who's got the best rating has a tendency to probably come higher up, or at least if all come, then the rating goes up, right? So there have been, I think, certain FAQs or certain decisions here about, and I think it's a recent one. I'll see if I can pull out and I can discuss with you. But there's been something where there's a question which is a little similar to say that there are certain organizations where they collect data or information about CA firms, right? What kind of services you get, what's your size, employee headcount, your revenues, your number of years of existence, whatever all those, right? The number of clients you have. And there's a very clear view by ICA that giving such information and allowing, or sharing that information with somebody to compile a list is prohibited, because essentially what you're doing there is you're trying to project yourself in a manner where you get compared with somebody else, and that may be an unfair comparison. Right? We always see this, and I must admit to say that all of you would have read it, there's nothing to hide. But in the newspapers, there's very often a comparison of the big four firms, right? Or they say that this firm has the largest share among the listed companies in India, and this is second, this is third, fourth, this is fifth, sixth, whatever, right? And I don't know how they get that information out. This firm's got so many partners, and this firm's got so much of staff. So while it does happen, and it happens with a certain name of some of these firms, which is probably not the name they use in India for their assurance services, but a part of the network or whatever. But I don't know how the ICI use it. But at least there is a FAQ, this much I can say because I've read it, where it is mentioned that you cannot be advertising, or it may kind of border on advertising and solicitation by putting across and showing that you're bigger than someone else.
Thank you, sir. Just one last question. This is regarding aggregation services. So there are a lot of companies online which provide incorporation and other book management services, but they don't do it actually. They actually outsource it to a CA firm. There is a clause in ethics which says you cannot accept work from a non-professional. Would that contradict, or is it okay to accept work from these services?
Sorry, I didn't get you. Are you talking about aggregation?
Yeah, some places.
See, aggregation is like that example what I spoke
Yeah.
of, right? Where you go like an Upwork kind of thing.
Okay, maybe you could say they're not an aggregator. They just say listed themselves as a, let's say, a startup, advisory company, but they technically do not have the professionals among them. They usually outsource the incorporation or any other work to an actual CA firm.
So it's a form of subcontracting.
Yeah, can the CA firm accept such jobs from these companies?
Okay, so here again, my view is you could, based on a pull factor, right? And you could, again, subject to certain considerations and restrictions on how the fees worked out, how the arrangement is, right? Because you can't have a profit share at the end of the day with a non-CA, you can't have a revenue share. So some of those aspects are what need to be considered. But otherwise, it can always happen, and I don't see anything wrong in it, because a lot of these things do obviously work based on a relationship and a comfort, right? And I'm not doing a roving inquiry across the market with all the firms who I know will potentially outsource to me this kind of work. I'm doing it when somebody asks, saying, hey, give me a firm profile and do you guys do this kind of service? And I say, yeah, and share the profile because they asked me, and then we have a conversation about what kind of skills we have and what capabilities we have, and they get convinced and ask me to submit a proposal, and then they may also be taking proposal from others, right? So it's a level playing field. So long as it is that, then I don't see an issue.
Thank you, sir.
Can member become a member of industrial association?
Okay.
First point, first question. Second, member in practice. Third, can a firm become a member of an industrial association?
Okay. So when you say industrial association or industry association, what kind of association are you talking about? Is it like
FICCI,
CIA?
CIA, CASIA,
Yeah.
Lagodu Bharti,
Yeah.
many.
Yeah. So I don't know what the right answer is, but my thought is I don't think you're prohibited to the extent that you're doing it as, you know, a professional who's there to kind of connect with and work with certain trade bodies, right? I mean, if you're going to attend that meeting and if you're going to be soliciting over there, then there's definitely an issue. But you can possibly be a part of it to make, to coordinate, to make representations or, you know.
Representation to the governments.
Yeah.
As a major work the association does.
Yeah, that's one of the things. But I don't know. I mean, I don't remember coming across any specific guidance. I can take another look at that. But I don't see much of an issue so long as, yeah, but my word is not final. We'll have to see.
Public sector company normally appoints tax consultant through bids and tender process. Can CA firm participate in bids and in this process?
Yeah. So that's again addressed in the FAQs, and again this recent batch of FAQs, one of the things it also allows is, as a CA firm or as a practitioner, you can go and register on the GEMS platform, which the government has, right? GEMS is
The open tender
sort of marketplace, yeah, where if there's an RFP which is going out to the whole world and any other CA has an equal opportunity to apply to it, then you can. But you can't go doing roving inquiries to all the PSUs and say, okay, I provide this service, do you want to tie up with me?
The open tender will participate.
Open tender. Sorry? Gem portal, yeah, you can. So that's actually clarified, it's there in the.
Okay, my question is sort of an extension to what the gentleman at the back asked. So let's say there's a fintech company that has an app or a website where they have a section where they say ask a tax expert. So if you register with, like if you associate yourself with such a company and you know they pay you on a basis where, let's say you give them 1 hour, like you're available for 1 hour to take questions. So they pay you, let's say, on a question basis or an hour basis. Is that permissible?
Yeah, so I think that was one of the first questions which came up, right? Where the response is yes, you can, but there are certain restrictions. You can't use that to solicit business, to advertise the firm. And if I remember right, I think it also says that you cannot have the firm name and chartered accountants going over there.
Okay, no, so basically...
So if you're like XYZ LLP, I think you should just say XYZ LLP and not call out yourself as a chartered.
No, it's basically a platform. So the platform has a particular name, whatever. You are just associating with them. Where, let's say every day, maybe for an hour, you're just answering the questions and queries that people come up with. So you're not advertising your firm, or let's say you're not saying that, okay, this is the advice I'm giving you, but if you want the service, you can come to my, like, you know, you can contact me and take services from my practice. If you're not saying that, it's okay.
Yeah, my sense is you can't do that to say, I give that service, come to me, but you can say,
you
okay.
can just answer the question.
Yeah, be very professional and say, okay, this is your question. So it's more like an academic presentation or an academic discussion that you're having with somebody. Okay? And the moment it gets into very specific facts and very specific solutioning, then you are kind of selling the service.
You can answer general questions, but not really a specific.
Yeah, I mean, it can be with some specificity. It's like I told you, somebody talks of 180 days or 182 days, resident, non-resident, you know, I sold a property, some question, you know, TDS on that, which let's say the buyer is going to do, whatever. we can probably answer those questions. Okay? But you can't give them solutions beyond that to say, okay, I'm going to come and help you. Any other questions? Thank you all. Hope you found it interesting. Love to hear some feedback.
One of the important topics as far as the profession is concerned, and thank you Niranjan for taking this session out and despite your busy schedule. Can you have a big round of applause to him? Request our chairman to hand over the momentum to the speaker.
Actually, I should say a big applause to all of you, because in an ethics session, very ethically sat in the end. Didn't sleep like I probably thought in the beginning, but yeah. So for staying here, I think you should all applause for yourself.
And of course they've been very interactive and asking all the questions, right questions, so that's good. So thank you members for your active participation, and we'll meet you in the next session. Thank you, good night.